Don't you love politics, guys? I mean, really, politics are an amazing thing. They cause divisions in countries. We know this, like for example, in Germany years ago, in where there was a division on August the 13th, 1961, when the residents of Berlin woke to a barbed wire barrier between the communist East and the non-communist West. Do you recall that? I don't, but that's when it happened. The Cold War was bitter. Soldiers quickly fortified the barriers, creating a concrete wall 12 feet high apparently and over 100 miles long. What did that do? Well, that separated loved ones. They were torn apart by this act, crushing people's hopes and lives and families. There were many attempts to bring about unity. Some tried to escape and others failed and died. Hundreds were killed. However, in 1989, restrictions between the two Berlins were lifted. The Berlin Wall came down. Let the walls fall down. The Cold War was over. Celebrations around the world culminated with Germany's reunification as a one country on October 3rd, 1990. That I do remember. However, much work had to be lay ahead to rebuild a city and a nation that had been divided by disagreement, laws and treaties, resulting in a literal wall of separation. Bad laws lead to wars. Bad laws lead to wars. The same way, friends, but slightly different, is what happened to Jehovah's Witnesses. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses once upon a time never had a disfellowshipping rule. Yet in 1952 they introduced that in. Who introduced that in? Was there a division amongst the people? Were they disagreeing amongst themselves and saying, I think we should have a disfellowshipping policy? Because in 1947 they called disfellowshipping or excommunication by the Catholic Church as a weapon of darkness. Now here they are, this organisation of light, the truth, they now introduce a weapon of darkness in 1952. But who did that? Who woke up to the barbed wires? The people did. And the walls were set there. But by who? By a governing body. These men who say they represented Jesus. Did Jesus all of a sudden say to them, listen, I think you guys need to separate people and actually start shunning people? And this is what happened. That decision in 1952 led to expulsion for whatever reason, and then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, because these bad policies that they introduced, for whatever their reasons were, and I could think of a few, but regardless, whatever the reasons were back then, they separated people. These laws were starting to separate people, and eventually they started to really shun people who they expelled or disfellowshipped for whatever their reasons were. Now, what's interesting, the governing body has decided, right, that they would bring down some of these restrictions on disfellowshipping. And so they've written an article, or a Watchtower article on August the 24th, or it's on the August the 24th. I personally haven't read it yet. I was alluded to this by someone who said, I'm really going to have a go at this one. I thought, okay, which one? I can see now. And so I'm going to spend a bit of time reading through it and see exactly what this means. But what's sad about all this is, unlike the situation in Berlin, I was going to say it's the same way, where laws and legalism can keep a nation divided by a wall of prejudice. But this isn't a wall of prejudice. right? This is not like the nation of Israel, where laws and legalism kept them prejudiced against the Gentiles. Okay? We know that Jesus tore down the spiritual wall of separation. But today, these wars by the Jehovah's Witness religion, they brought it up themselves for their own self-preservation of their authority. They didn't like any dissent at all. And from what I understand, they've relaxed some of these laws regarding disfellowshipping, even how they even call people. They no longer call a disfellowship person a member, but an individual. And I don't even think they're even going to use the word disfellowship. You're no longer disfellowshipped, but that you're something else, removed from the congregation, something like this. However, I think from what I've read, some of the comments, I've only read some comments, that they're not dropping the case against apostates, because they have apostates are the ones that talk truth, or at least expose their errors, right, in some way, or are critiquing their information. They're not necessarily being negative, they're just critiquing, like you should. 1 John 4:1. Other scriptures like Acts 17:11 helps you to appreciate that this is a normal thing for believers to do. But they don't like it. They don't like to be critiqued by their members. So if you're someone that's doing that, they're going to kick you out, call you an apostate, so no one talks to you, right? That's the whole point. So this would be interesting. Are they really letting the walls down for the purpose of love? Or is it because that the governments of the world have called them out because of their lack of love and their evilness in putting up the walls in the first place? Something that they should never ever done. But because of their threat of their power, I believe, they had to do it. Now they can use whatever they want as to the reasons why, but it was a threat to their leadership. Friends, I will have a read of it. I hope maybe you have read it as well. Maybe you have come to some conclusion. What's strange about all this is these changes that they're doing and the timing of these changes. And as I said to you and alluded to you, that I think a lot of it has to do with how the world governments are responding to their bad policies. Because it is a bad policy that they started with. Will they admit that? That's the big question. You see, how can you forgive someone when they're not sorry for the harm that they've caused by their bad decisions, especially for such a long time, decades? How can you forgive such people? Can you? I guess you can, but do you have to? I guess you don't. You really don't. You can actually move on and not forgive them because they don't care, right? Because their decision to do this is really for the self-preservation. Again, same thing, but they're preserving their own authority, and they're just lightening the terminology, changing the terminology to fit political and the governments of today, because they are a corporate entity and they have charitable status threatened globally. They've also been called out, such countries as Norway, as extreme in their practices. And so this hatefulness that has been put upon them because they themselves are not very loving. See, when you have an outside source telling you, hey, there's something wrong, it was done by the Australian Commission, Royal Commission here, by the judges there, call them out, and now one country after the other, Russia has, and now Norway has, told them that their literature is dangerous and the way they're behaving is unacceptable. Well, that's different, right? Why? because now it affects their hip pocket as an organization. That's why they're moving to such changes. Not because they're benevolent and loving and kind and hoping their kindness is sort of seen. It is seen, but not in the right light. It is a welcome change for sure. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to tear this down in some way. Let's take the good for what it is, right? Let's take that out. But their motives, their motivation is questionable. At least they could have come out and said, we're sorry, we've hurt you people, we've damaged families, we're really sorry about that. How can we make it up to you? Like a normal person would, right? What can I do to fix this? What do they think? What do you think they're going to do? Nothing. All they're doing is changing a few words around and saying to the elders, hey, you know, you can go and now catch up with these guys. I'm sure that's what these articles will be saying. Catch up with these guys that you kicked out under our instruction, of course. And under one strike policy rule, some people are getting kicked out not even under one strike, right? But don't talk to those apostates. Oh gosh, you know, they're a different kettle of fish altogether. So it'll be interesting. I'll go through these Watchtower articles and have a look at it, and maybe I'll put up a separate video just on those and give you my thoughts, as there are many others, of course, doing it by now, because it is big news as I came to hear about it. It is a big change, a welcome change for sure. There are many people hurting and would like to speak to their loved ones who've been shunned all this time. Of course, you know, unfortunately the loved ones in are suffering as well, just like the division in Berlin. But these were done by policies that had unfortunate repercussions. They didn't have to do this. Jehovah's Witness, the leadership, they didn't have to bring in disfellowshipping. They called it out. They called the Catholic Church out as saying that this doctrine was, that is the excommunication doctrine, was a weapon of darkness. And yet, what did they do? Did the same thing, right? They introduced it into the Jehovah's Witness family back then. So watch this space. Let's have a look. See if you haven't had a look. Maybe you have. Maybe you've formulated some ideas. Has anyone contacted you since? That's the next question I'd like to ask. Has any family members, former family members, have spoken to you since? Has any dialogue happened? Has a couple of words, hey, you know, how you doing, happened? Are they actually implementing it? It may come a bit in a bit of time. It may, because I think they're sort of saying it's up to you now, up to your conscience, not up to us. You know, they're wiping their hands clean. They're doing a pilot, right? Pontius Pilate, hey, we're washing our hands clean of this. There's something, they're innocent. We've got nothing to do with it. If you decide not to talk to them, that's on you now, right? This is what they're doing to the witnesses. Hey, it's on you now. You decide. You know, we're washing our hands from this bad doctrine that we introduced. So anyway, all right, guys, that's a couple of thoughts there. See if these walls go all the way down. Let's see. Go back to where they started. I think they might be heading that way. I think this is just the first step. It seems like they're becoming more mainstream than ever before, and I wonder why. See you guys.